As we reach the end of 2025, Epic Universe has been open for around 8 months, and at this point, it's clear that it's not the perfect park. It is certainly a creative triumph, in the sense that it pushes boundaries with the audaciousness of its theming, but it is still held back by the reality of budgets and creative design philosophy that have guided it into the product that it currently is. No park is perfect on opening, and while there do seem to be a lot of rumors flying around that Epic will begin expanding relatively quickly, I thought that it would be interesting to do a video that points out the current issues I see with the park and what I would personally do to fix them. This includes some operational changes, but it's mostly just about what I think each land is missing because the park seems to be lacking or feels incomplete, and I think that I have ideas that would go a long way in fixing that. You might have seen my video from the summer where I spoke about my overall impression of the park. It warns people about having unrealistic expectations due to the sheer hype that surrounded it. But while there are many areas where it excels in delightful ways, there are others where I think that Universal should have taken a hard look at the project and realized that there was a much better way to execute it than how they did. Epic Universe is still an incredible park, but it's not without mistakes. It really needs time to grow into something better. After having time to reflect on it, I think that even for all the issues of Islands of Adventure, that park is still better than Epic because it feels like a more complete experience. And that's taking into account that the Lost Continent is currently in a state of limbo as it gets ready to be replaced. I also think that the Kong attraction is underwhelming despite its one cool animated figure, so I avoid it. And I also never really ride the attractions in Toon Lagoon because they get you so maliciously wet that I actually have to plan my day around bringing the right clothes if I want to ride them. Still, even if you removed all of that, the lineup of this park is stacked with rides and experiences that I think makes it the best park in Orlando. And unfortunately, Epic just hasn't grown into the park it should be, which is obviously understandable at less than a year of operation. Epic really excites me because it has so much potential though. And so today, I wanted to explore the park land by land and point out the issues holding it back, and proposing what I think would be the right choices to fix them. I first want to begin in Celestial Park, and also ask you the favor of leaving a like on the video. I'm about to leave on a trip, which means I won't have another video out roughly for another 2 weeks, so it would be helpful if you just left a like to help boost this one. In my opinion, Celestial Park is fairly well realized as the shopping and dining hub of the park, and the inclusion of the carousel and Stardust Racers really helps bring it up into being one of my favorite theme park lands of all time. However, I think that the land could really be rounded out by adding another attraction or two. Recently, Alicia Stella at Theme Park Stop has reported that permits have been filed for a new building on a small expansion plot between Otherworld's Mercantile and Super Nintendo World. According to her, this will likely be used as event space and could support other entertainment infrastructure, but I think that this project could include a small attraction. I'm not speaking about the building itself, but rather where the project reaches Celestial Park, right across the pathway from Atlantic. What makes Celestial Park interesting is that it's a hub of time and space, bringing different universes together in a way that feels natural and cohesive. You can see how Otherworld's Mercantile sells merchandise from all the other portals, how Celestiki includes drinks that reference the story behind Volcano Bay, and how North Star Wintry Wonders includes Earl the Squirrel, a character created for the Christmas events for Universal Studios Florida, who has his own lore and backstory. The different themed restaurants around Celestial Park also reinforce the idea of how other worlds bleed in, and Stardust Racers also references Back to the Future, as the trains have flux capacitors stuck onto the back. So, when Celestial Park currently seems to be kind of struggling with entertainment, why not have characters from specific franchises wandering around? What I'm proposing is that another portal be built in front of the events building, which could not only work as a pathway in and out of the park that would block the building from sight, but could also be used for entertainment where any character that you wanted could come out. You could meet Doc Brown, Earl the Squirrel, or even one of the Watari people from Volcano Bay. It would be a way for Universal to test reception of other characters from franchises not represented in the park. It could also work like Avengers Campus, where new characters would premiere to coincide with a film release. I'm not a huge entertainment person or someone who likes to meet characters, but I think that a relatively simple idea like this has an audience. And since it's on a major pathway where people run to Super Nintendo World, it would be very visible and would attract a fair number of people even later in the day. In terms of rides, I unfortunately don't think that Celestial Park was really built with expansion in mind, but I think that there may be some ideas that could work. If you look between Pizza Moon and the Oak and Star Tavern, there is a wide open space that leads to a substantial expansion plot, which I'm assuming will have another portal entrance in the future. However, I think that a small flat ride could reasonably fit in this space while still allowing enough room for a portal, and so from here, I'm taking inspiration from Pizza Moon. In my initial Epic video, I did make the statement that the restaurant was inspired by Coney Island-style boardwalk parks from the early 20th century, but a few people corrected me and pointed out that this space is instead designed to be a theater. While that may be true, I still think that the entertainment aesthetic of the era works in favor of taking inspiration from old boardwalks, and so I would like to see a flat ride that feels like it's out of time placed to the right of the restaurant. Immediately, I think of something like Hero Maxim's flying machine at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which has operated since 1904 and was recreated by D.H. Morgan for California Adventure in 2001. I think that a flying machine like this could provide some nice kineticism to the area, or if you wanted to get really crazy, maybe Universal could try something like the scenic spiral wheel from Luna Park, which premiered in 1917. Nothing like this exists any longer, and while the R&D would probably make this expensive for Universal, I don't think that you can deny that it would be a visual spectacle that would generate a lot of positive buzz for the park. I'm just fascinated by these old boardwalk parks, so I would love for Epic to take a little more inspiration from them. To finish up Celestial Park, I also want to make two more points that I feel can improve on it. First, while I doubt that Universal would spend the money to modify the exterior of the Grand Helios Hotel, a lot of people have noted that it feels a bit plain, and could benefit from more detail. I also noticed that when Efteling opened its new hotel this year, known as the Efteling Grand Hotel, a lot of people pointed out that its decorative aspects make it what Helios could have been, and I very much agree. Yeah, it would be impractical to currently add more ornamentation to Helios, but I'm actually surprised that Universal didn't do more with this from the start, because it really could have benefited from being less plain. Finally, I also want to point out that while Epic has two great dark rides, and one that people are more mixed on with Mario Kart, I do think that it could benefit from more of them. On opening, it became clear that an original character created for the park, Captain Cacao, was immensely popular as he sold many plushies. Captain Cacao is the mascot for the packaging of the candy in the park, and if you walk into Moonship Chocolates and Celestial Sweets, you can find a little backstory about him as a character as he travels through the portals and collects treats from other universes. A lot of people have thrown around the idea that Captain Cacao should get his own little dark ride where you board a moonship from a suspended ride system, kind of like Peter Pan's Flight or the E.T. Adventure, and I also very much agree with this as well. It's clear the character is already popular, but I think for this level of investment, corporate executives would need another selling point, and that brings me back to the idea of the portal where any character could come out of it. A Captain Cacao dark ride could take you into many wondrous worlds in search of treats, but it could also take you into places based on franchises with a lot of merchandising opportunity, like Kung Fu Panda or Despicable Me. I don't think that a project like this could be greenlit without that guaranteed merchandising opportunity, but I do think it would be a welcome addition to the park. The only question is, where would it fit? To me, the answer is obviously the small expansion pad where the events building is supposed to go, but obviously that space is taken. That actually seems like a really inefficient use of space, because you could easily fit a smaller attraction in here, and an event building could go anywhere. But regardless, I think that Celestial Park could really benefit from a dark ride, even if it's very unlikely to happen. Due to how Celestial Park was constructed, there's just not a lot of room for expansion, but if I were in charge of the direction of the park, these ideas are what I would implement to help flesh it out further. So with that said, let me know if you found any of these ideas interesting or not, and let's move on to discussing the different lands of the portals. One of the toughest lands to change is Super Nintendo World, and a large part of the reason is because it's essentially a copy and paste of the version that opened in Universal Studios Japan, which was designed with the limited space available in that park. In Florida, this land is overwhelmingly crowded, traps heat and humidity, and lacks flexible space for any additional attractions based on the Mario franchise. If you go past Donkey Kong Country, that expansion plot could easily be used for Nintendo, but assuming that the rumors of a land based on The Legend of Zelda could be going there are true, it leaves more Mario off the table. It's clear why Universal just built the same land that they planned in Japan though, as redesigning it would have cost a lot more money in an already expensive park, but a larger version of this land could have really alleviated crowds and could have allowed for a future attraction based on the Mario franchise that distinguishes itself from Mario Kart. I also have an issue with Yoshi's Adventure just being far too short, and while there's really no space to have expanded the attraction, a redesigned Super Nintendo World could have allowed it to be a true dark ride with additional indoor scenes, allowing for a nice break from the sun. I like what Super Nintendo World is doing visually, and how it innovates with its interactive games, and I even think that Mario Kart is a highly underrated attraction, but my answer for improving on the land goes back to the design phase and building it larger, knowing that more expansion for another Mario-themed dark ride should exist. I know that's obviously impractical, and there are a lot of factors that directed it into the land that it is today, but I do think that it needed a rework. With this being said, Donkey Kong Country could reasonably receive another attraction in the form of a small flat ride. Off to the side, and bleeding a bit into the expansion plot, I do think there's plenty of room for something like an aerial carousel. You know, like Dumbo, or One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. I would put in a ride system like this, but include rideable animals wearing the bongo jetpacks that Diddy Kong sometimes has, because while the ride may not do much for park capacity, this area is currently a bit of a dead end and could use something else, even if the impact is minimal. There's not a lot you can do for Super Nintendo World without touching the adjacent expansion pad, but I'm just excited to see what comes there next. Moving on to the Isle of Berk, I think there are many more plausible changes that could be made, and some of them would be relatively simple. For example, while this land is definitely the worst in terms of sightlines bleeding in, because how are you realistically going to hide Stardust, I do see areas of easy improvement. For example, the theater that hosts the Untrainable Dragon show could be hidden better by just planting larger trees, and on Hiccup Swing Gliders, there's a lot of areas that could be more immersive if trees were planted on relatively small berms. I've also noticed that after the train leaves the stands, there's a boom lift parked adjacent to the track, which feels like it could easily be fixed by a themed cover or just finding another place for it to sit. Another issue with Hiccups is that while the actual coaster layout is excellent, it feels like it's missing a scene to tie it all together. The one with Hiccup and Toothless at the beginning is fun, and the Gronkle scene in the middle is exciting, but otherwise, it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of theming here. I do think that when the coaster twists around the sheep, that is probably considered a ride scene, especially since there's dialogue that points them out, But because you naturally look forward on coasters, most people will actually miss this, and it's not like there was a lot going on there anyways. To me, the solution seems relatively simple. At the end of the ride as you come to the brake run, it actually seems like there was plenty of space for a final covered scene. It could have been something like a covered area with animated figures of Toothless and a waving Hiccup with some dialogue, which I think would have gone a long way in making the ride feel like it had more substance that it's currently missing. I also think that Berk itself is missing a dark ride, and there appears to be an expansion plot behind the theater that would be perfect for this. There is a bit of criticism in regards to Disney for what are often called book report rides, as in rides that just take you through the story beats of a film, but I can't say that I mind them if they're done well. I think that in the case of Berk, a small, family-friendly style dark ride that retells the story of the first How to Train Your Dragon film of how Hiccup and Toothless meet would actually make a lot of sense for the land. It could be framed as another character retelling that story as you're visually immersed into a stylized expression of it, and this ride could go exactly where that expansion plot is behind the theater. Initially, I thought that maybe this could be a high-capacity boat ride where guests board Viking longboats, but since Fire Drill is right there, I wondered if it would maybe feel a bit redundant, so maybe a more traditional dark ride system would make sense. To me, making some small improvements to Hiccup's wing gliders by building berms and adding a scene, along with including a dark ride, would go a long way in making Berk feel a lot more complete. I also think that, unlike Super Nintendo World, these projects would be a lot more logistically plausible, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a dark ride actually be built here in the future. Moving on, I don't have much to actually say about Wizarding Paris, because it seems like the actual solution to my issues with it are being addressed. I think that the land itself is fantastic, as it's full of little details that reveal themselves if you explore, but a lot of what the land offers is hidden away behind buying and using a wand. It's certainly rewarding, but one corner of the land where the entrance to the French Ministry of Magic is located feels empty, and the land overall feels like it's lacking in explorability aspect unless you have a wand to reveal some of its cooler elements. With this being said, I have to yet again reference Alicia Stella, who reported on permits that indicated additional shops would be added to the land, which includes a bakery and a robe shop. A big part of what makes Diagon Alley so excellent is that there are a lot of interior spaces to explore through the shops, even if you don't actually purchase anything. Walking around them adds to the overall enjoyment of the land because they give it a sense of depth. And while Wizarding Paris does have 3 shops to currently browse, another 2 will still go a long way in making this land feel a bit more substantial. Alicia has also reported that permits have been filed to begin work on a massive expansion pad near the French Ministry, so it does seem that this will be the first major expansion for Epic and will make the land feel a lot more substantial. If I had to offer one fix for the land, I would actually change how Le Cirque Arcanu loads its pre-show. Currently, people are all just crammed into the room where it can be difficult to see how this portion of the show plays out, but I think that the room could be modified with tiered standing rows, which could be themed as wooden bleachers. Poseidon's Fury showed that this could work on an operational level, so while I doubt that Universal will close this attraction to modify the pre-show, I do think that this is a practical solution. Otherwise, I think that Wizarding Paris is better than it's given credit for, and most of its issues are already in the process of being addressed. Moving on to the final end of the park, and my favorite, Dark Universe. I just don't really have a lot to say about it. Monsters Unchained isn't perfect, but it's still one of the strongest dark rides ever created, and I love the theming of the land, even if it is quite small. I think if I had to improve the village of Darkmoor, I would try to find a way to add an additional store, and I think it would even benefit from a walkthrough attraction. Maybe it could be guided by actors, or maybe it's a self-guided tour, but a small story-driven experience that somehow ties into the overall theme of the land and isn't a scare maze could give it a sense of depth that it is currently missing. I really like the atmosphere of Das Steakhouse, so just give me more atmosphere and I'll be happy. If there's one big issue with Darkmoor, it's the Curse of the Werewolf just feels out of place. From initial concept art of the park, it appeared that this land was supposed to open with a show, but I'm deducing that it was cut for whatever reason, and that Curse of the Werewolf replaced it as a last minute change, which you can really tell because the theming here is really the bare minimum. It's a bit of a shame because it is a fun spinning coaster, especially when your car is weighted correctly to actually spin, but it's lacking the level of theming that is present everywhere else in the park. My solution to fixing this is an expensive one, but I think that the ride would actually be really successful if it was located indoors. I mean, imagine the building is covered well by dense oak trees and other brush, allowing you to feel like you're gradually stepping into a dark forest as you walk up to the queue. This would enhance the land quite a lot, but would also make the ride a lot more appealing as well. As you dispatched out of the station, you would find yourself in the forest and surrounded by werewolves on both sides of the train. To escape, the train launches into the course where riders have more thrilling encounters as they're being chased, and this could turn an off-the-shelf experience placed in a land that it doesn't really belong in into something that feels a lot more exciting and thematically substantial. I think that actually erecting a building around the coaster could be plausible, but the issue is that it would be prohibitively expensive, especially for a coaster with such low capacity and a land that is the least popular compared to the other portals. I also think that Dark Universe could use another additional attraction as well, and while there is that rumor of a Creature from the Black Lagoon boat ride for its expansion plot, I just don't think that the land is receiving enough interest to justify this attraction over other areas of the park, at least at this time. I'm also really curious about what the cancelled show would have been as well, so maybe, eventually that will get reworked into the expansion plot instead. To finish up this video, I actually wanted to throw an idea out there for how this park could expand in the future. Currently, between Stardust Racers and Wizarding Paris, there is a massive plot of land that could be used for another portal, and a lot of people have speculated on what this could be, with popular ideas including the Lord of the Rings, SpongeBob, or Wicked. I actually think that a good use for this area would be for an expansion of Celestial Park, which could solve a few issues. First, while the idea of giant lands being contained in portals is pretty interesting, it does limit the park in smaller experiences that it could offer. Second, regardless of what land you build here, Stardust Racers is going to dominate the sightline, and so, by expanding Celestial Park, it still fits the theming. Instead of an entire land based on a single IP, I would instead propose smaller individual attractions in this area that all have their own respective portals. For example, while I think that the world of The Wizard of Oz has a lot of potential, I don't think that Wicked itself has enough content to carry an entire land. Instead, you could have a portal leading either to a ride, or more realistically, a well-themed theater that presents an abridged version of the musical. If you watch me often, you also know that I'm a big fan of the Secret Life of Pets ride at Universal Hollywood, and while I still think that this ride could fit in Universal Studios Florida if they used space creatively, I think that it also could come to Epic in this Celestial Park expansion. By opening up Celestial Park in this way, there would be a lot more potential for self-contained rides and attractions, and while it sacrifices a big mega land that other people might want, it might actually make more sense for the park long term, as I think that the industry will eventually move away from single IP lands. This video might not be the longest or have the most substance in it, but I did think that it would be fun to throw together quickly to highlight some of the issues of Epic, and what I might do to fix them, even though some are just downright unrealistic, like redesigning Super Nintendo World. Others though, like adding a flat ride to Celestial Park, adding more to Hiccup's Wing Gliders and a dark ride to Berk, or even enclosing Curse of the Werewolf could be plausible, and the only thing really holding Universal back is how they weigh budgets against these benefits. Realistically, I expect that Universal already has strong plans for how they intend to change and add on to Epic in the future, but it's fun to imagine what could be. If you found any of the ideas in this video interesting, please let me know what you think about them in the comments, and if you have your own ideas, I would like to hear them as well. However, I do want to emphasize that if you do have something interesting, I also want to know how it fits into the park logistically. A lot of people throw ideas out there, but they're often just not realistic because they don't take into account the reality of limited space and logistics. If you enjoyed this video or just want to support me, you can also help me out by leaving a like. And if you haven't yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can also do so now to be alerted to new videos as they're released.